Research that resonates.
Schweizer has not been wrong on any of his years and years of reporting on the Bidens.
Investigations that matter.
If your last name wasn't Biden, do you think you would have been asked to be on the board of 𝑏𝒂?
I don't know. Probably not. But that's, I don't think that there's a lot of things that would have happened in my life that if my last name wasn't Biden.
The only entities, the only people that would report on this, and Peter Schweizer, who deserves a Medal of Freedom, in my view.
This is the Drilldown with Peter Schweizer.
Hi, this is Peter Schweizer, and welcome to the Drilldown, where we relentlessly expose cronyism, corruption, and the abuse of power in Washington, D.C. The co-host of the program, of course, 𝐃𝐫𝐢𝐥𝐿. Eric, this election season is the craziest election season I've ever experienced. We've now had a second assassination attempt on Donald Trump. But the other issue, I think, related to that is usually when candidates are going at it, they're debating issues. What should the tax rate be? What should our policy be in this particular area? This is actually an election about truth. What is going on in the country and what's not going on in the country?
This is such a crazy, on the one hand, it's a lot to keep up with. On the other hand, I'm grateful for the insanely tumultuous news cycle because it gives us a lot to talk about on the podcast.
It does.
And the audience continues to respond. Our audience continues to grow. This podcast, I dare say, hotter than a Lebanese pager, Peter Schweizer. But this is how busy the cycle has been. We're not even going to get to talk about the crazy sex ring Puff Daddy is running.
Right.
Even though it might be connected to...
That's small news compared to what's going on in the election.
Small news compared to what's happening in the news cycle, where you've got, what started with a story of are Haitians eating cats in this neighborhood in Ohio was turned to who's really telling the truth and what causes what, to your larger point.
Yeah.
And I think, the fact that there has been a second assassination attempt is a great way to start, because it's like, wait a minute, we're now told that the second assassination attempt isn't necessarily the fault of the person who they found at Donald Trump's golf course, but in fact, it's the fault of Donald Trump and his running mate, J.D. Vance.
Yeah, exactly. Their rhetoric is inciting people. Now, this is sort of in any other context is a ridiculous approach. This is like the classic, well, I hit my wife because she deserved it, right? You're basically saying that Donald Trump deserved this violence because of the actions that he was taking. It's absurd. Nobody would argue that in any other context, but for some reason they feel comfortable making this point as it relates to Donald Trump. And by the way, historically, when you look at other figures where there have been assassination attempts and successful assassinations, this has been the argument. The assassination is the ultimate form of censorship, right?
Yeah, this is a really interesting point. Talk about that.
Yeah, well, we're debating censorship in this country, and there are a lot of people that are advocating for censorship on big tech platforms. They want people silenced in general. In other words, we need to protect and create a safe environment so censorship is justified. Well, an assassination is the ultimate form of censorship. Why was Martin Luther King Jr. killed? They wanted him to shut up.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted him to shut up about what he was saying. So if you think about it in that context, which I think is in reality what's going on, it gives you a broader perspective of the battle that's going on in this country with regards to what actually is the truth, whether it's the issue of migrants in Ohio and the rest of the country, or whether it's what Donald Trump is saying, does it reflect the reality of what's going on, and is he entitled to say it?
And here's what it is, and how we're back kind of in the cat neighborhood, but it's about the thing that he's saying by referencing the Haitians eating the cats and dogs.
Yeah.
And to your point about the assassination attempt is a form of censorship.
Yeah.
And there are other forms of censorship specifically related to the immigration discussion that Donald Trump kind of veered into with the Haitian cat story that is also attempted to be censored. Because consider this, in the weeks after the debate, in where people are now discussing. Mike DeWine sent the National Guard to Springfield, Ohio. Media members are there. Are there really? People eating cats. But it's become the story about, well, now the Haitians are under attack. And to the extent that there was actually bomb threats called in to several of these schools in Ohio.
Yeah, and Trump was blamed for that, correct? Because he made this claim about the cats and dogs, and these death threats came. But there's a twist in the story.
The twist is that the bomb threats, happened, but the bomb threats weren't by people who were listening to Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. They weren't made by Americans at all. Even Ohio Governor Mike DeWine has admitted that the threats themselves were a hoax. They all came from foreign countries.
That's amazing to me. So literally people outside of the country, I mean, this is becoming a globalized conversation about migrants getting into the country. So they're trying to exacerbate the problem and make it worse by doing this.
And the point of that is they have an unwitting ally, or maybe an intentionally witting ally, in Vice President Kamala Harris, because even more than 24 hours after Ohio Governor Mike DeWine admits that these bomb threats were not a result of incendiary rhetoric because of Donald Trump and J.D. Vance, but in fact bad foreign actors.
She has a history of doing this. I mean, in instances where, you know, she plays a particular card, it's oftentimes the race card, and even though the facts and the evidence clearly shows that something is not true, she sort of doubles down on it. The one that comes to mind for me, of course, is the Jussie Smollett case.
Yeah, she's wrong about lots of things, not the least of which, it's worth pointing out, is what the night before picture day at school is like in the household.
It's a crying shame. I mean, my heart breaks for this community. You know, there were children, elementary school children, who it was school photo day. You remember what that's like? Going to school on picture day? Who were dressed up in their best, got all ready, knew what they were going to wear the night before, and had to be evacuated. Children. A whole community put in fear.
Let me tell you what doesn't happen. It's not like this peaceful, angelic, like, oh, we get the outfit picked out. Bro, there's screaming, there's crying. Mom's upset because she wants to do your hair a certain way and she wants you to wear this outfit and you don't want to wear that outfit. Yeah. So it's not that. And the fact that they would try to exploit the idea that picture day was ruined because of these bomb threats as it relates to Donald Trump is actually as bad, if not worse, incendiary rhetoric than anything I think Donald Trump or J.D. Vance have said. But that aside, you're correct. She has a track record of doing this.
What's really remarkable about that clip is, as you pointed out, it's about school picture day and the drama. But the thing I can't figure out is why is she talking so slow?
So I think she's trying to channel her inner child. She's like capturing this, like, oh, remember it's child picture day.
Yeah.
It's like that. It's like one of the many accents apparently Kamala Harris is quite adept at, in case you were unaware of her the characters that she plays on the stage. But I think she also plays the character of, we're under attack again by these racists. You mentioned Jussie Smollett. She called Jussie Smollett's attack a, quote, modern day lynching. Now, it was a modern day something, but it wasn't actual lynching.
It was a self-inflicted lynching.
Turns out it didn't actually happen.
Right, exactly right. Exactly right. I mean, you know, and of course, she never came out later and apologized for that claim because, of course, the fact that she claims it's a lynching, you know, she's the one that's really trying to instill the fear here, right? To amp up the fear. But that's not the only instance. There was an incident on the border as well that turned out not to be true that she also made a strong statement about.
Also related to Haitian immigrants. So this is not the first time she's exaggerated Haitians' plights and the things that they're facing.
This was the Border Patrol agents on horseback that allegedly, which turned out not to be true, were whipping Haitian migrants at the border. She had something to say about that.
Yeah, by the way, 3 years ago this month this happened. She said human beings should not be treated that way. She said the situation brought to mind how such tactics have been used against the indigenous people of our country, have been used against African Americans during times of slavery. So if you're keeping score at home, Border Patrol agents protecting the sovereignty and security of this country brings about the images of slavery.
Yeah, which by the way, let's remember, her ancestors in Jamaica were slaveholders, so maybe there's a family history there.
Let me tell you who hasn't forgotten that. The the Border Patrol. There's still a little... Turns out, if you accuse Border Patrol agents of acting like slaveholders and whipping people, they tend not to forget it. But the point is this, right? They're still acting like that the whole Haitian thing, everything they said, including the cat thing, it's a hoax, it's a racist trope, and it's irresponsible to bring up. So unfortunately now, or maybe fortunately if you care about the truth, facts are starting to leak out that support lots of things. I mean, there are police reports where you have a report that a police officer says he spoke to someone named Anna, that back in August, she said her cat was missing. She suspects the Haitian neighbor. She also found meat in her backyard. She, by the way, sad moment for Anna, collected the meat, this is per the police report, and put it in her refrigerator to get it cremated to honor her cat. But that's the thing that happened in Springfield, Ohio. So that's just one of a few stories.
The point is there's a basis for some of it. But what's interesting to me is think about the approach that they're taking here. And the left does this a lot. They will take an issue like concerns and anxieties that people have about a migrant influx into their community. And then a story comes out about, involving the eating of cats and dogs. Now, is the story true? Is the story not true? All right, that's subject to debate. But the point is what the left does is says, no, it's not true. Ergo, you shouldn't discuss any of the migrant issue. It would be like me saying this blonde guy came and beat me up. And it turns out he's not blonde. He was brunette. And then it's like, well, you can't really talk about it. It didn't really happen because you got the hair color wrong. They're trying to avoid the larger issue, which is the migration problem in America and the anxiety that communities have where large numbers of migrants are being placed there that is completely changing the culture of these communities, Springfield, Ohio being one of them.
But hardly the only one. And the numbers on this, and this is what we're really kind of getting into today, are quite staggering because what you just said, the Biden-Harris immigration policies, another reason, by the way, the Border Patrol agents ain't no big fans of Biden-Harris, are fundamentally changing the faces of many communities, not just in Ohio. And it's not just the admission, it's the protocols, it's the benefits they're receiving, and the lack of oversight that follows through, which suggests that these people will be here in perpetuity under a number of programs. So when we talk about immigration, there's several different things that are true. Like there's the Springfield, Ohio, that's part of a program that allows people claiming asylum from 4 different countries. But that's the third channel we will discuss for the rest of the podcast. Legal citizenship, by the way. We let in roughly 1 million immigrants a year through legal channels. And apparently they mostly come from Mexico, China, India, and the Philippines. Did you know, which you kind of did because you're an expert in many things, the Biden-Harris administration is granting citizenship at the fastest rate in a decade. 3.3 million immigrants have become citizens under Biden-Harris, and that's just the legal form. I did not know that acceleration. And, look, my view, my parents were legal immigrants. I think legal immigration is a very good thing. You have to make sure that the numbers are not going to overwhelm communities, that it's not going to change the culture of America, because you want immigrants to come and assimilate. And if they come in mass numbers, they tend to stick together and they don't assimilate as well. So the legal immigration part doesn't bother me as much. It's the fact, because when you're a legal immigrant, of course, you go through a background check. There are things that are done. It's the illegal part, which you have no control over in terms of who's coming in and the quantities that are coming. And this is the area where the Biden administration has, let's say, really accelerated in failure, right? They've really accelerated in failure because 1 million a year coming legally. The estimate is that the illegal migrants is 10 million. And the problem during the Biden administration, and the problem is you don't know what you don't know. So it could be much higher than that. This is an estimate. It's an estimate. And just so you know, the numbers that they're using, they're going to use terms like foreign born. Now, these are like official things, and undocumented immigrants are by definition undocumented. So we don't necessarily have a hard count on that, which makes other claims very challenging, including like how many of them are voting. We'll talk about that. Donald Trump had some ideas and some numbers on that. But one of the official numbers that we do know, since Joe Biden took office in January 2021, the foreign-born population in this country has grown by 6.4 million people. That's larger, by the way, than the individual population of 33 states.
Wow.
Meaning that the U.S. population now that's foreign-born has hit a new high. It's 51 million. Peter Schweizer, that's 15% of the U.S. population was now born somewhere else.
That's amazing.
And so some people would say, hey, that's cool if they're coming through legal channels and we're getting them assimilated. But communities like Springfield, Ohio, with their 1/3 population increase of Haitian migrants is indicative of how when you have surges of people from other places, they do change the face of these communities.
Of course they do. And that's the reason, by the way, they didn't take 20,000 Haitians and drop them in Wilmington, Delaware. Right? A place where, Joe Biden would see how it was changing his community. I mean, they select these places because they put them in places that are not politically connected, that are not part of their power base. And I think that's part of it that's intentional. So we have that part of the problem. There's also this program, the CHNV program, that has been set up. Now, these are for people that come into the country illegally, but gives them sort of a fast track to permanent resident status if they are from countries or nations that have particularly dramatic circumstances.
They get to claim a certain sort of asylum.
Yes, exactly.
And it's not like they have to prove citizenship from these places.
Exactly
They just
right.
get to say, hey,
Yes.
I'm seeking asylum. And
these countries are, by the way, Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela are the 4 countries. And here's the part about this that to me is so utterly bizarre. So these 4 countries, in the cases, of course, Nicaragua and Venezuela and Cuba, it's because of the political system, the oppressive governments there, which we certainly I think are terrible. And I'd love to see all of those governments overthrown. In Haiti, it's just chaos, right? There's no governance whatsoever, which is also a terrible situation. But here's the problem. Somebody comes across the border into the United States, applies under this program for asylum. What do? They say, well, we need to vet these guys before we grant them status. So what do? They go to the Cuban, Venezuelan, or Nicaraguan government and say, does this person have a criminal record? Now, note to self, Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela hate the United States. Those regimes hate us. Do they really think that those guys are going to say, no, Jose's a really, really bad guy. You need to send him back to Cuba? Of course not, they're going to say. So the absurdity of this, there's no screening, there's no restrictions on it. And once they get this status, they are basically in the country permanently.
They're basically in the country permanently, and to the point, well, maybe not permanently, but at least through the 2030. Right? Because there are these places set up, and that's what's part of the crazy part of the story. There's offices set up, these ICE offices meant to examine and have these interim conversations with these immigrants, and who, by the way, are collecting lots of benefits while they're here, to the tune of potentially over $1 billion, because if you're from Cuba and you're from Haiti, you have access to Medicaid, you have access to SNAP, and there's a Daily Mail analysis that suggested that the 3 benefits, if the entire populations of Haiti and Cuba took advantage of them, would cost $3.4 billion. But the idea is that these people have this notice to appear court summons after being released at the border.
Right.
But these offices where they're supposed to appear, New York is the most popular one. They're full, and the New York Post reported this, till 2033. Like, they're booking appointments till then. It's like a table at a restaurant, except for it's a terrible restaurant because it's full of undocumented migrants from countries that hate us.
Right,
the food might be okay, but bro.
And by the way, it's a really crowded restaurant because in 2023, 520,000 people were admitted through this program. There's not going to be any vetting and screening. And when you see all the violence that we hear, the Venezuelan gangs, this sort of stuff, I think there's no doubt some people in those gangs have applied through this program, and they're probably going to get in because how can you deny them? I mean, the Venezuelan government's not going to say, no, he's bad, he's in a gang, don't let him stay in your country.
Yeah, hey, where'd that serial rapist go? Oh, he's in the United States? Oh, send him back, please.
Exactly right.
And by the way, they're making focal, well, he was a serial rapist 8 years ago when we sent him to you guys. And so, but you're just now getting around to make that call.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons, I mean, we sort of joke about it, but it's one of the reasons why people raise the very serious issue of the crimes being committed in this country. It's because these people very well could have been criminals in their previous countries, and they've come here, and there is no vetting system at the moment they're allowed in to keep them, or to make sure the people that we're letting in from committing, we're not stopping them from committing more crimes.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And those are crimes they're committing against the people. Then there's the potential crimes they're committing against democracy.
Yeah, exactly. And that is the issue of elections, right? And this gateway that you get in America, that if you can get a driver's license in a lot of states, you automatically are put on the voter rolls unless you indicate otherwise. In other words, you need to opt out. I mean, this reminds me, this is going to date me. There used to be these things called record clubs or music clubs, right? Where you would get some free albums, and then they would send you an album every month, and unless you opted out. Well, it was a great business model because most people did not opt out. So they would send the album and you would end up with this album that you didn't want. That's the problem with this sort of passive approach to voter registration, which is you're not forcing somebody to prove that they actually can vote based on citizenship. You're saying you're going to be registered to vote unless you tell us that you're not qualified to vote. And that's why you were finding all these reports of, people that are not in the country legally, or people that are not citizens that are showing up on these voter rolls.
And that's a very serious issue. But just quickly, back to your previous point, is the fact that you were in a music club why, when you go to your house, you see the top Latin salsa hits 1 through 9? Is that what it was?
Yes.
And why is up till September?
Yeah, before I was going to write books, I was going to be a salsa dancer, but that didn't quite work out.
Well, they are dancing to the polls in Arizona, because this story literally came out this week. 100,000 Arizonans who registered to vote over the last 20 years were mistakenly considered to have provided proof of citizenship. And they just now realized they didn't actually provide proof of citizenship, to the point. And so what that means, though, is that if you don't prove this, I don't understand this, because if you're not actually a citizen, you're not allowed to vote in federal elections. But in Arizona, if you haven't provided proof of citizenship, then you're considered to be what's called a federal-only voter. And so they had 98,000 people in this category that were considered to be full voters, but then they realized, they haven't actually provided proof of citizenship. Now it gets weird, because a lot of those people, turns out, are Republicans. And so the Secretary of State's actually arguing to let them continue to vote in state elections.
Yeah, I don't favor that.
Even though they haven't been able to provide proof of citizenship. But the fact came up because the Maricopa County Recorder's Office told the Secretary of State that they discovered someone who hadn't provided proof of citizenship. One of the 98,000, it was actually an illegal alien. Yeah. And so they hadn't voted, but the point is, this was somebody that was on the voter rolls as considered to have provided proof of citizenship, so they could have. Yeah. That's the problem. And right, look, there are migrants. The Cuban community, for example, votes Republican. For me, that's not the issue. It's we know that Democrats favor this. They've spoken about the fact that the more migrants that come, then they want them give them permanent status. Then they want them to give them a pathway to citizenship, and they know that it's going to be to their advantage electorally. They say that. They admit that. But to me, the point is not to try to get the Republican migrants that are here and don't have status to vote. It's to recognize that they're not supposed to have a voice in our government because they're not stakeholders. They're not citizens. And that's, I think, the larger issue. Yeah, and so states like Virginia have found thousands of illegal aliens on their voter rolls. They just took 6,300 of them off. Texas has removed over 6,500. By the way, these states could be removing a lot more, but they're kept from doing so because of Democrats' effort to fight this thing called the SAVE Act, which is meant to make voting by non-citizens even more cumbersome, troublesome. People would say, well, it's already illegal. Well, sure, but that doesn't mean it doesn't happen. We've told you about how Michigan has admitted there's 500,000 names on its rolls. If those people don't vote now, then they'll take them off. But that's 500,000 examples of people who all you have to do is get a ballot sent to that address. Right. Maybe the person doesn't live there anymore. Maybe it's a non-citizen, whatever it is. And you got these groups who are paid to go out, and they're now chasing ballots, not voters.
Exactly right.
And so when you're chasing ballots, not voters, which is a legacy of the 2020 election season, and you've got lots of names that don't belong there, then you got a lot of ballots that don't belong there, and it becomes a recipe for disaster.
Yeah. You wrote about this in your book Fraud in 2018, right? You were ahead of the curve. This was ballot harvesting. What do they call it down in South Florida? Granny rolling?
Granny rolling is a very different thing. It's granny farming. Granny rolling farming is what they do at the villages, everybody. So, but that's
granny farming. Sorry.
but the point would be with the illegal immigrants, you have you've got Tom Perez, who is in the Biden administration, special advisor to the White House, and he used to be the head of the DNC, and he ran an organization whose job it was to expand non-citizen voting rights. Of the 15 cities that non-citizen voting is permitted in local elections, 11 of them are in the state that he was in charge of.
Maryland.
So, in Maryland, absolutely. So, this is clearly part of the agenda. So you kind of combine it all. What starts with a comment about cats turns into, well, you're inciting violence. Well, actually, only Donald Trump's the one that's getting violence, and the violence we think is happening because of you is actually a hoax, and you're a racist if you talk about it, but actually, immigration is a huge problem. It's impacting communities and might undermine our elections.
Yeah. No, it's remarkable. We are going to continue to follow this story, of course. It is unprecedented in my memory that we've had an election like this. And honestly, this is a really tragic and scary thing to say, but we have to contemplate the possibility that Trump may not be alive by November.
Mm-hmm.
Given the fact there have been now 2 attempts, and there seems to be this resistance to increasing security, in what's already a very disconcerting electoral cycle, this battle over truth, the denial that certain things are occurring or not occurring, that is certainly something we, God forbid, have to be prepared for.
I'm going to go the other way. I'm going to put a positive spin on it.
Mm-hmm.
The first assassination attempt actually got him. Second one, not even close to him.
So it's going
the other way. We're getting better at it.
Good. Well, that's the optimist view. That's the optimist view. We're going to leave on an optimistic note. We appreciate you, as always, taking the time to listen to us, to be part of the conversation. You learned a lot today. You learned about granny rolling, for example.
No, they didn't.
And several other interesting features of the immigration debate. We appreciate you taking the time, as always. You can follow our research at thedrilldown.com, and you can find this podcast wherever fine podcasts are located. Until next time, thank you.